Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles, as I take some time out from my extremely busy schedule of playing the shit out of the latest massive content patch in World of Warcraft, in order to bring you a World of Tanks video for today. Yes, I know, I am far too good to you. This is Christiansen Destroyer in the T-54 Mod 1 here on Derpenberg. The matchmaking's not too bad, 7 tier 8s, everybody else tier 7s. Christiansen is of course top tier in this premium Soviet tier 8 medium tank. Is it just me, or there are a lot of Soviet premium tier 8 medium tanks in the game? I mean, including the T-54 Mod 1, there are 6. Although this one is fairly good. The armour's not bad for a tier 8 medium. It's got pretty good camo rating, and above average gun depression. Very unusual for a Soviet medium, hell for a Soviet anything. And Christiansen is going to be putting that above average Soviet gun depression to very good use throughout the course of this game. But probably the best thing about this tank, we've already mentioned it, is its armour. By tier 8 medium tank standards, it's actually pretty damn good, at least from the front. The turret is 200mm thick, and the upper glacis is 120mm thick and sloped back very heavily, which means that if you're shooting at this tank from the front and your gun has less than 175mm of penetration, you are going to have a very hard time doing any kind of damage whatsoever to a T-54 Mod 1. And that better than average frontal armour for a medium tank, in combination with the better than average gun depression for a Soviet medium tank, means that Christiansen is going to be able to do things with the T-54 Mod 1 that you wouldn't be able to do in most other Soviet medium tanks. Working ridge lines. Now let's not get too carried away about the gun depression. It's not good, it's just better than average for a Soviet tank. You still have to wiggle the tank around a bit to find the right angles from which to be able to actually get that gun down, but you have to expose a lot less of the tank to do so than you would if you were, for example, in a T-44 or even a T-54. On the downside, you're going to find that with only 190mm of penetration, although that isn't going to be too much of a problem in this battle because he is top tier, that T-54 Mod 1 drivers tend to find themselves having to load the gold. The APCR ammunition does have 247mm of penetration, which is tier 10 medium tank standards, although it's going to cost you to use it. And the other thing that's not so good is the relatively bad gun handling, which means that when you are working a ridgeline like this, unless your targets are sitting still, just waiting for your aiming reticle to steady, your traditional pop-up, snap a shot off, pop back into cover manoeuvres that you tend to conduct when you're fighting in this kind of position will result in a lot of missed shots. And if you're using the gold, that is going to get very, very expensive very, very quickly. So the fact that Christiansen Destroyer is in probably one of the better Soviet medium tanks for dealing with this kind of ridgeline fighting situation is a good thing, because he's the only one on his team over here doing it. Although he is about to be joined by an E25, which is not one of the better machines in the game for working a ridgeline. The E25 was camped in the woods to the rear, waiting for Christiansen to spot some targets for him, but the targets that Christiansen was spotting, the E25 mustn't have had shots at, so he's moved up in an effort to find some targets of his own, which is very, very brave of him, and he is going to find some targets, but unfortunately for him, they're going to find him too. So the E25 displaying how not to play sneaky tank destroyers, and getting himself killed very, very quickly indeed. Although Christiansen was able to pull a kill back in the process. So previously Christiansen was effectively the only member of his team working this side of the map, and with the death of the E25 he's now actually the only member of his team working this side of the map. I'm quite disappointed that nobody seems to have drowned themselves yet. It's just not quite the same old Derpenberg that we all know and love. When they remodeled the maps for World of Tanks 1.0, it's just as easy to fall into the river, but they've made it less difficult to get out, which, I don't know. Derpenberg just isn't Derpenberg unless there's at least one tank in each match fall into a watery grave as they roll off the edge of a bridge or tumble off the side of an embankment and get themselves stuck in the river and slowly drown to death. But who knows, perhaps in a future patch they'll make it less easy to get out of the river once you've accidentally stumbled into it, or even been pushed into it, because that was fun on Derpenberg as well. Just grinding up against an enemy tank and toppling them over the embankment into the river, and just watching them flail around helplessly, knowing that there was nothing they could do. And now they can actually get out again afterwards, which I don't know, I just think it's downright unsporting of wargaming. They're leeching the fun out of this map. Although you can always sit on them and keep their heads underwater until they expire of natural causes, so that's kind of fun too, I suppose. Well anyway, Christiansen, having decided that this Batchat 12T is the only remaining enemy tank on this side of the map, goes after him hoping to finish him off, and then finds out the hard way that there was in fact a Jagdpanther camping the back of the map, and unlike the E25 on Christiansen's team, resisting the temptation to go for a wander and see what he could find, which means that the Batchat, unfortunately, is probably going to get away with it. So, not great news, but not entirely bad news either, because if the Jagdpanther is camping the bushes at the back of the map, with the Batchat 12T having run off, there's going to be nothing spotting targets for the Jagdpanther anymore. So, Christiansen now has an opportunity to go and hunt himself a tank destroyer. So, be very, very quiet when hunting Jagdpanthers. And of course, if the opportunity presents itself to pop a couple of shots into the flanks of any enemy tanks in the town centre, we're certainly not going to refuse the opportunity. No immediate sign of the Jagdpanther. But then again, Sixth Sense hasn't gone off either, so nobody's spotted him yet either. And that fact alone gives us some very useful intelligence. It means that the Batchat 12T hasn't merely pulled back to the next ridgeline and is hiding behind a bush, waiting to spot further targets for that Jagdpanther. And he also didn't get spotted by the Jagdpanther, which might mean one of two things. Either the Jagdpanther has also pulled back now that there's nobody up here to spot targets for him, or he's sitting in such a bad position that he had no visibility of the ridgeline. Now if that was the case, the Jagdpanther would have been in these trees here, and he obviously wasn't, or more likely, based on the angle that the Jagdpanther's shot came from, those trees over there on the riverbank. No sign of the Jagdpanther, although there is an enemy Leo. But if the Jagdpanther was in those trees, down by the riverbank, Christiansen would have been spotted by now. And he clearly hasn't. So he takes a bit of a chance, holding his fire and not taking shots at the Leo as he moves up to get into cover behind the bushes in order to strike from here, and that's when he spots the enemy artillery and throws caution to the wind, because that's just far too juicy a target to pass up. And yet, despite the fact that he's sitting in the open, blazing away at and killing a GW Panther, he still doesn't get spotted. At least not until he finally moves out from behind this small patch of trees and finds the Jagdpanther at long last. And based on that, that guy appears to have been sitting in that exact same position for probably the last 4 minutes, with nothing spotted and nothing to shoot at, just waiting for Christiansen to pop over the ridge where Christiansen hasn't actually been for the last 4 minutes because he's been working his way around the flank, and he's just been sitting there waiting for it to happen, and caught completely by surprise as Christiansen suddenly appeared behind him. Not entirely sure how that could have come as a surprise to the Jagdpanther, who was still facing in the other direction while Christiansen was busy killing the artillery behind him, but whatever. And there's the Batchat 12T. Right. He seems to be trying to finish Christiansen off with a fatal dose of gold poisoning, although given that Christiansen is almost the last tank left alive on his team, that's probably quite understandable. Unfortunately for the Batchat, he only has a 4-shot autoloader, and he's blown his load. Equally unfortunately, while he does have excellent mobility, Christiansen isn't quite dumb enough to try to chase him around the building, and catches him on the other side, finishing him off. At which point Christiansen now is the last tank left alive on his team, against 3 enemies. 3 enemies who, between them, are responsible for the deaths of 9 of Christiansen's teammates. And one of them is capping, which means Christiansen... okay, 2 surviving enemy teammates. And one of them is capping, which means Christiansen can't afford to do anything fancy, really, and he pretty much has to go for it. And since he was obviously spotted when killing the Emil, they know exactly where he is and exactly where he's going to be coming from. So they've got all the time in the world to set up, waiting for him. And if that Ferdinand has the 128mm gun, it has 246mm of penetration and does 490 average damage, and Christensen only has 484 health remaining. And with only 5 seconds to reset the cap, Christensen is just going to have to pray to RN Jesus. Sideways on in front of the, yes, 128mm gun of the Ferdinand, and the Ferdinand manages to find somewhere on the side of a T-54 Mod 1 where a gun with 246mm of penetration is going to bounce. The Leo swooped in from the flank, anxious to finish it off. Christensen backing up so he can continue to fight just the Leo and not the Leo and the Ferdinand as the Ferdinand attempts to lumber its way around the corner. The Leo unable to get around the flank, finding out exactly how tough a T-54 Mod 1 can be to penetrate from the front when it's top tier. The Ferdinand not wanting to die, waiting for Christensen to take the shot which seals the fate of the Leo, but then hesitates before coming around the corner, throwing away the advantage that he had while Christensen was reloading, and of course as he came around the corner, exposing the thin cheek plate armour at the front of the upper glacis of the tank, a notorious weak spot in the Ferdinand's frontal armour which can be penetrated easily by the T-54 Mod 1's gun, even when firing regular armour-piercing ammunition. And so that was a very cheeky ace tanker, Radley Walters, Defender, Steel Wall, High Caliber and Top Gun for Christensen Destroyer in the T-54 Mod 1, with 5,000 damage done, nearly 2,700 damage blocked by armour, and despite the use of 10 rounds of gold ammunition, he still turned a very respectable profit of almost 160,000 credits. Christensen Destroyer, T-54 Mod 1. That's it for today, folks. Hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.